Hey everyone, Megan Olivi here. Welcome inside the Anaheim Convention Center. I'm joined by Brett Okamoto and Marc Raimondi. All right, guys, this has been a week. We have two titles on the line in our main event. You guys did an amazing recap of the press conference, which was weird.
It was weird. And I believe we also said that it was weird.
Yes, you did.
Put that on the record.
You did. But we're moved past it, and we're waiting for weigh-ins to start here. And now the anticipation really is on these stylistic matchups in the co-main and main event where belts are on the line. Speaking with a lot of people this week, Brett, it seems like everyone is torn with both of these fights. How do we call them? How do we pick them? If you have to decide in our main event who leaves the heavyweight world champion for the UFC undisputed, what's the biggest variable that makes you say one or the other?
Oh, man. I mean, it's a cliche answer because you can say it about any fight, but it's going to come down to execution. That's why no one can pick it, is because if Ciryl executes, I think almost all of us are convinced that he is the more skilled, more technical guy. But, he can be winning this fight for, 24 minutes and 59 seconds, and then it just takes one shot from Francis Ngannou. So it really is going to take, it's going to take composure. It's going to take capitalizing on certain opportunities, and it's just going to take execution. I think both of these guys know. It's no secret. They know what they need to do to win. So now they just got to go out and do it.
Marc, when we watched the lead up to this main event, we saw a lot of things come into play. And one of the big ones is this storyline of former teammates, and Ciryl got the better of Francis, and now Francis saying, I knocked him out. Do you feel like, number one, that any of that matters? And do you feel like emotions come into play into this one, maybe more than we've seen in either of their fights throughout their UFC careers?
Yeah, these are both great questions, and I think the fight kind of hinges on the answers to both those questions. As far as the sparring goes, I think that I don't know if either one gets an advantage because they both have seen each other now, and they're both unique in their own ways as far as heavyweights go. So Francis has seen Cyryl's footwork, his speed, his technique. He's seen that already. Whereas Gane has seen Ngannou's power and his strength. They've seen that. So there isn't going to be a whole lot of surprises. Now certainly both have grown since 2019, the last time they sparred each other. But I think that's kind of a push. The one thing that I will say is that I do think that Gane having Fernand Lopez, who is the guy who really taught Francis Ngannou how to fight in MMA, him in his corner and how to prepare for him, I think that is an advantage in some ways. How much of one, I don't know. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, I can't even remember now. Oh, emotion. Do you think emotion affects either of them in the octagon?
I absolutely do. I do think there's a lot of emotion.
Interesting.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if it will, but it certainly could, because there is real bad blood between Ngannou and Fernand Lopez.
Yes.
There's no doubt.
Yes.
And I feel like Fernand Lopez, and maybe it's by design, he's kind of picking that scab, and he has been in the lead up to this fight. And Gane has not completely played into it, but he's talked about, that MSG incident where Ngannou walked past them and didn't say hello to, the two of them and Nasser Numabov. So I do think it's a possible factor, maybe more with Francis than Gane, because I feel like Gane has tried to separate himself from that whole situation, but maybe not. Maybe he's close with Lopez. It's tough. It's certainly more emotionally packed than any of their previous fights.
Okay, fair enough. In terms of the length of this one, of course, scheduled for 25 minutes, but Brett, does it go that long?
I don't think so. I think that, again, I go back to these guys both know what they need to do to win the fight. So Francis knows that. He knows, man. Eric Nixick is a smart guy. His coach, there's no secret about this. They don't want to go 25 minutes.
Right.
So I think that they're going to have that baked into the game plan. At some point in the first two rounds, you got to go. You got to go after him. I mean, you can't do the Derek Lewis thing and kind of just stand back at him, because we saw exactly what happened to Derek Lewis. Now, Francis Ngannou is a much different animal than Derek Lewis, but the strategy has to be to go. And so I think he's going to go. I think he's going to try to win this fight in the first two rounds. And if he is unsuccessful and he starts to gas, then I think we're going to see the same thing that Ciryl did with Derek Lewis, where he is going to start to take his opportunities then to try and put the fight away.
Right. Marc, before we wrap up this main event conversation and move on to our co-main event, I'm curious, as people who watch fighters for a living, who go to gyms and see different training sessions, how much stake can anyone ever put on the fact that, hey, this guy won rounds in the gym against this other person, and now they're facing off in the octagon? Do you feel like that matters?
I don't think so. I really don't feel like it matters. And I think it matters even less when it comes to someone like Francis Ngannou, who, when you're sparring with him, when you're training with him, he is not going to be putting 100% of his power,
right,
because he would have no sparring partners left. They would be in the hospital. I mean, I'm being honest. I mean,
yeah,
he's the guy who can shut the lights out of any person on the planet. So there's no way he can go 100%. So if he's not going 100%, how much can you really glean from those training sessions?
And that's why I do think it could matter. It could matter, but only for Francis, because he knows how hard he was going. So if he tells himself, like, you know, I was only going 20%.
I was still getting
just wait till I go 100%.
Right.
If that was the case, that could really give him a lot of confidence.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see how this main event plays out in that title unification bout for the heavyweight championship. But in the co-main event, we go from the biggest weight class to the smallest in terms of the men's divisions. And this one is in the flyweight division. These are two guys who, they haven't trained together before, but they've spent over 30 minutes competing against one another, Brett. They're familiar foes. It seems like at times there's a ton of respect. Like after Brandon won the belt and there was great sportsmanship in the octagon, but then yesterday got super weird. Emotionally, since we've talked about that with the main event, but emotionally, how does this one play out?
I don't know. The answer to that is in Deiveson Figueiredo, because Brandon Moreno is going to be the same guy. Like I think he's a little bit annoyed that Deiveson kind of keeps trying to make this personal, but at the end of the day, Brandon's like rock solid. We know that. We know he's rock solid mentally, so he's going to go in and be the same guy. What was up with Deiveson in the second fight? That's what we need an answer to. Yeah. Was it the weight cut? He says that he was building a gym, and so he couldn't focus correctly. He wasn't himself, though. So if he's corrected those, which it seems like he corrected his weight cut, looked great on the scale, made weight, no problems, had energy, looked happy, you know, as opposed to last time he was crying when he walked off of the scale. But mentally, is he the same guy? And I've just been curious about that, because I've said that this guy was a bully. He was bullying that 125-pound division, and then he was unable to bully Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno did not step back. He didn't give him an inch. And so when a bully can't bully anymore, is he the same guy? I think that is the real question, because physically he looks great. Mentally, what's he going to look like in this fight? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, staying on the theme of Deiveson Figueiredo, he moved, of course, to train under Henry Cejudo in Arizona for about 4 months, 4 or 5 months. Can there be enough learned in that time to shore up whatever we saw from that second fight?
That's a tough one to say. Possibly yes. If you figure that in the first fight they went to a draw, you could say that Figueiredo is not far off when he's at his best to beating Brandon Moreno, or at least being even with Brandon Moreno. So could the 4 months working with a Henry Cejudo and Eric Albarracin and Eddie Shaw down at Fight Ready, could that push him over the hump? Certainly could. Will it? I don't know. I mean, there have also been many times, as you guys know, that the first training camp in a new place does not always go as planned, because you're kind of relearning some things that you already knew, and you're trying to implement a lot of new things into your game rather than kind of going back to your bread and butter. You know, you're thinking in the cage of what your coaches said instead of reacting to what you know how to do. So it can go either way. It's kind of a double-edged sword, I think.
If you are Deiveson, Mark, and you had that fight against Brandon, that's obviously disappointing. You lose your belt. What do you work on the most? Is it the wrestling? Is it the grappling? Is it the jab defense? Because we saw Brandon's jab be so effective. I mean, what really is it that you say, this is where I need to put that focus on improvement?
I would say wrestling. I mean, it's across the board. I mean, I would even say almost none of those things, but what Brett alluded to, the weight cut. I think that the weight cut was huge. Him getting down to a manageable weight before fight week, which he did, was huge. But also not making a flight from Brazil to the United States on fight week, and already being in Arizona, already being in a similar time zone, not having to do that, that brutal trip, which he did it in Abu Dhabi. He's done it, I mean, so many times. So I think that could help. But I would say wrestling, and I mean, if Henry Cejudo is a gold medalist, if he adds just a few tweaks to his game, that could certainly help. But it's just so hard to tell in a small window.
Brett, on the flip side, Brandon Moreno was very adamant when he talked to us this week. I don't want to be the guy who gets to the top of the mountain and then starts sliding down. So when you look at him as an overall athlete, not just these fights with Figueiredo that he's had, but also just really his career here in the UFC, what needs to go right? Where does he need to keep growing in order to keep that belt?
I mean, he's doing it. He's a guy who's showing improvements each and every fight. His seems like the most improved part of his game lately has been his striking. I mean, his striking just looks so on point. He's more of a technical boxer, and that's it's almost this co-main event is slightly similar to the main event in certain ways, in that Francis needs to land the big shot, Deiveson might need to land the big shot, and then you got the Ciryl and Brandon, who are kind of the more technical guys, certainly in Ciryl's case, but in Brandon's case as well. His hands just look good. I think mentally, man, he's just growing up too. I mean, we forget this kid's young. What is he, 28 now?
Yeah.
I mean, only 28, and he's had a long career at 28 already. So I just think, he's embracing all the pressure of being the first Mexican champ, that's real, man. That is a lot of pressure to be carrying all those people's hopes and to be representing them in that way. So he's doing everything right. So just keep doing what he's doing. And then again, I go back to just he is rock solid mentally. I mean, he's just so happy during fight week. He's jovial. He's loose. He is a champion, man. So he just needs to limit his mistakes and execute.
And that's genuinely who Brandon Moreno is. All right, guys, we are in Southern California. One thing we know about the co-main event that we can be sure to hang our hats on is this crowd will be 100% all in for Brandon Moreno.
Yes, they will.
They have already started to show up for the weigh-ins here. We will see you tomorrow from the Honda Center for UFC 270. Thanks so much for watching.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.